In this video, we'll look at handling exceptions or errors in your Genero programs. Exception handling simply means planning what should happen if an error occurs during program execution. If an error occurs, the runtime system throws exceptions that can be handled by the program by actions. Runtime errors or exceptions can be trapped by a whenever handler or by a TryCatch block. We'll take a look at these in this video. Here you see the classes of exceptions. These classes define the types of errors that can occur and what actions can be taken to manage them. There are 4 types of exceptions defining the kind of errors that can occur. There's an error or SQL error, which for example would be an invalid database name. There's any error, which would be an expression evaluation error such as division by 0. There's a not found error, which is a SQL statement returning status not found, so no rows found. And that might occur when when a cursor is on the last row. Or a warning, which is a SQL statement that has set the SQLA warn flags. So for example, we fetched a char value. The fetched char value has been truncated and a flagged warning has been signaled. Now, actions to take based on an exception that has been raised are to stop, so the program is immediately terminated. A message is displayed to the standard error with the location of the related statement, the error number, and the details of the exception. An action to take could be to continue, where the program continues normally and the exception is ignored. To call a function, the function name is called by the runtime system. The function can be defined in any module, must have 0 parameters and 0 return values. You can go to a specific place in the program by identifying a label, or you can raise the exception. This statement instructs the DVM that an exception raised will not be handled by the local function, but by the calling function. So if an exception is raised, the current function will return and exception handling is left to the calling function. Now, trapping errors, there are 2 ways. There is the whenever handler, can be used in Genero, and the TryCatch block. Let's take a look at the whenever instruction. The whenever instruction in your code defines exception handling in a program module by associating an exception class with an exception action. So if we look here, we can see whenever error is the exception class, and we are associating that with what is going to happen. We're going to call a function, and the function name is error function. And you can see here, or by further looking in the documentation, the exception classes as we saw on a prior slide, as well as the actions that can be taken. In this example, if an error occurs, the error handler function is called. You'll notice here in the error handler function that we're displaying a variable of status. Status is a built-in variable that can be used just as you would use the sqlca.sql code variable. The status variable is automatically set with the error code when you use whenever error call. It's also important to note that the scope of the whenever handler is modular wide. So when you define a whenever handler, it's defined for the rest of the module, or until a new handler is defined in that module. In this example, the whenever error handler begins before a set of SQL statements with the continue keyword and ends after the statements with the keyword stop. If an exception is raised during the processing of these statements, the program is to continue. Notice that the programmer has supplied an error statement to display the code of the error that was raised, much as we saw with using status in the prior slide. After executing a SQL statement, you can query status, SQL state, SQL error message, and the SQLCA record to get the description of the error. When the statement has been executed with errors, status and SQLCA code contain the SQL error code. If no errors occur, status and SQLCA.SQL code are set to 0. The other way that you can trap exceptions is with the TryCatch block. Any FGL statement in the try block will be executed until an exception is thrown. After an exception, the program execution continues in the catch block. If no catch block is provided, the execution continues after the end try. Without an exception, the program continues after end try. So the try statements can be nested in other try statements, and also note that the TryCatch block are pseudo statements. It's not possible to set a debugger breakpoint at try, catch, or end try. Let's look at an example. In this example, if an error occurs in the try block, the catch block will be used. So if these statements cause an error, then the catch block or this display statement will be used. If no error occurs, the program continues after the end try. Now in this example, we're using both whenever and TryCatch. So the first thing you see is whenever any error. So any error, we're going to call error handler. And error handler is down here. Now that's going to be in effect except while the program is in this try block. If there's an error during this try block, then the catch block will be used. After the end try, then the previous error handler is restored, which is our whenever handling. And so again, you can see how these can be working together. So in summary, exception handling is a construct designed to handle the occurrence of exceptions or errors, which are special conditions that change the normal flow of the program execution. In Genero, exceptions can be trapped by the whenever handler or by a TryCatch block. So again, with the whenever handler, you're mapping the exception type with an action to take, and with the TryCatch block, you're defining the try block with what error might occur, and the catch block, if an error occurs, what you want to do with that. Also, it's important to note that there's no way to raise exceptions explicitly. Only the runtime system can throw exceptions. There's more information in the documentation on both the whenever handler and the TryCatch block.